So again, if you're following along, I'm around page 240 or so. How to work with lists, links, and navigation menus. All right? So what does that mean? That means that next week, when you take your test on chapters 7 and 8, you can pretty much be assured that you are going to be asked to work with ordered lists, unordered lists, possibly definition lists. We'll talk about those, and just they're not used very often, but just to show them to you. Hyperlinks, and setting up navigation menus. All right? So, how to code unordered lists. If we look in here, I think you all know what an unordered list is. It's a list that has no order to it. So in other words, if I listed, if somebody said, hey, write down on a piece of paper everyone who's in your class. All right? And they didn't, and I said, do you want it in alphabetical order? No. Just, where they're sitting. So I'd say Aaron, Jameer, Christopher, or however I would do it. All right? So if we did something like that then, all right, and I came in here, let's see. There we go. Come on. Now, the unordered list that's in here right now, okay, that's in here right now, it's set up so that it doesn't show, it does not show the dots, the dashes, etc. I don't want to monkey with that, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab this. In fact, it'd be easiest to do it like this. I'm going to take the link to my style sheet here, and I'm just going to comment it out. Now this is going to look ugly. All right, you've been warned. But when I come in here and I bring it up, okay, since it has no CSS, okay, hopefully that makes sense to everybody. All right. Now when I come in here, you'll notice I've got two unordered lists. If I change that from an unordered list to an ordered list, and I went back and looked at it, you'll notice how that changed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't think that's a big surprise or anything to anyone. All right. So there's examples of an unordered list. By default, as it says, it's displayed as a bullet list, but you can change the bullets. So let's look at how to do that. These, when you go in here, there's OL. Now, where do they show it? By default, all right, by default, I guess they'll show it a little later in here. Again, it shows as a dot, a period, a circle that's colored in. That's called a disk, D-I-S-C. That's what it's called by default. That's the one that's set up by default. If you set it to circle, it's a circle that's not colored in. A square is a square that's colored in. If you don't want to use one of those, you can bring in your own. You may or may not remember this, and they didn't really exactly use it like this, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. When we looked at the original Travis Tritt site, you notice, what does he have here? Okay, we could have set those up so stars could have been used. All right, and then you come in and you use your own image to do that. Since it's your own image, you can typically style it and do whatever you want to do with it. I suppose I've never tried to do this, but I suppose if you wanted to style the dots or something and make them another color, you could probably do that. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but I suppose you probably could. So again, there's an ordered list. Oh, one thing with an ordered list, notice this. See that? Ordered lists by default start with 1. And when you do an ordered list, you can do them starting with 1, starting with 0, 1. All right, so having a leading 0, starting with a lowercase a, starting with an uppercase a, starting with a Roman numeral I, lowercase, or a Roman numeral I uppercase. Those are your choices. All right. But here they started with 4. Why? Because they already had these 3 here. Then this is a new list. So rather than starting up again, they made the start value 4. All right. So when we look at this, here's a nested list. A nested list is a list within a list. The easiest way for me to describe that is, I don't know what year it was in school that I had to start writing an outline, where I might have Roman numerals and then letters inside of there, numbers inside of there, and letters inside of there, etc. There is no limit to what you can do in here. So notice what they have in here. They've got an unordered list, and inside of that unordered list, there's each unordered list item has got an ordered list nested within it. All right. As it says, you can nest lists by coding one list as an item for another list. All right. A description list, these are, like I said, are the ones that are not used very often. There might have been one of these on one of your assignments. I don't remember. But a description list, a DL, all right, as it says, it creates a description list. DT technically stands for its description term, and DD is for description definition. What it does by default is it typically puts the left justifies this is a term, and then that's the definition, term definition. So if you are writing some kind of a page where you're having a glossary, these are often used. All right. All right. Now let's talk about how to format these things then. Notice list, style, type. Please look up on the screen here. List, style, type. Again, these are your choices for an unordered list. Disk, I already mentioned what it was, circle, square, and none. None is most often used when you want to remove, if you've got an unordered list that's got hyperlinks in it and you want to remove the underscore, or the underline, I should say. You set the list style type to none. All right? So they've got 2 unordered lists here, and you'll notice for the first one, okay, they put in just circle, and the second one, they use their own image. So this supposes that you've got a star. Does that make sense to people? Because I believe on the next test, you very well might be asked to go out and grab a little image of something and put that in there. All right, I don't remember. I haven't looked at your next test yet. So as it says, you can change the bullet that's displayed by using the list style type. And again, if it is your own image, instead of saying list style type, which has these 4 possibilities, it's list style image. Since it's an image, all right, it should be in your images folder. Just get used to doing that. I know that it drove one of my students nuts a few years ago. He came up to me and he said, okay, I'm getting all this stuff. I do understand why there's an images folder. I understand why there's a CSS folder. It was early in the semester, and he said, I even understand why there'll be a JavaScript folder. Why the heck isn't there an HTML folder? What if I have hundreds of files, of HTML files? Why aren't they in a folder? And I said, I can't give you a good reason. Whoever started setting this up, set it up that way. And they said, well, I just, and you could just tell it was really bugging him. I said, fine, make an HTML folder and put them in there. You're going to have to change your path then for all those files, but if that makes it easier for you to understand it, then go do it. But I said out in industry, you typically won't find it set up that way. All right. Any questions then on styling in unordered list? All right. Then for an ordered list, as mentioned, here's your possibilities. These are the 6. I already told them to you, so I'm not going to read them to you. This, and this doesn't go back, just so you know, Angie, this isn't what you asked. But this stuff should always go in the CSS. You shouldn't put this stuff in the HTML. Even with style tags, you shouldn't do that. Unless you've got some weird kind of thing that you're doing just for one page of a site. then you can use style tags. All right. Remember, there's external CSS when it's in its own file. There's internal CSS when they're in style tags on a page. And there's inline CSS, which you should really never use. So again, they show the HTML for it. And then they say for this ordered list, it's lowercase alpha. So you can see exactly what it is. It starts to get important that if you're going to be doing a lot of nesting and you're going to have this list within this list within this list, you typically don't see it more than 3 or 4. It just gets too hard for people to understand otherwise. And the last thing you want somebody to do is to go out to your website and be confused, especially if you're trying to sell something. All right. So as it says, you can change the numbering system by using the list style type property. The default is decimal, as we've already seen. All right. Now, one thing, when you come in and you put in that normalize, what you're typically going to find is in a browser, this is going to look like this. In other words, pretty much this stuff is going to be pushed over either as far as it can be to the left or the top if you're using horizontal or vertical. All right. But you can go in there and change that by adding padding and or margin. All right. We've talked about these already before. Padding is basically the area within an element. Margin is the area between elements. All right. And again, you know, if you're still confused, go back to your test and go back where you've got your nav bar on the top and add some margin and add some padding. That's the best way for you to learn because you get immediate feedback, or just, you know, make a jump page or whatever and do that. So as it says, you can use margins and padding to control indentations. You can use it to control just about anything. It says this works the best if you use the margin and padding using either M's or rems. Again, don't use fixed numbers. Don't use pixels or points. This is the kind of thing where percentages wouldn't make any sense. Does that make sense to you? Percentages are typically going to be used with widths and heights. All right. Okay. How to code links. Did I keep that? Let's see. There we go. Okay. If you look up on the screen right here, what we're going to talk about right now are what are called CSS pseudo classes. P-S-E-U-D-O, pseudo meaning false. I don't know why they're called that. There probably is a story behind it. When you are working with hyperlinks, I'm not saying you have to write this down because you can find it online. But notice where I say the recommended order is. If you're going to put that in your CSS, do a :link first, then a :visited. Then, you know, if you're going to use all of these, do them in this order. What would happen is if you did it in the other order, you might overwrite something that you put in there. All right, but these all have a meaning. Now, there might be some cute little acronym or something that you can use. I mean, LVFHA, I don't know. You can make up your own or whatever, but it's, you know, you can look it up. It's not that it's that big of a thing. All right, but link, then visited, then focus, then hover, then active. Now, a couple of these you already know. Link is just what color the hyperlink is, and you know by default it's blue. It's underlined and it's blue. Visited, you know what that is. By default, it's underlined and it's purple. All right. Let's see. Focus is basically when you put your mouse on it and leave it there. All right. And hover means almost the same thing. I think active, you're going to see these. They're in the book in a minute. One of them is if you take your mouse and you click on it, but you haven't let go yet. All right. Some of these you might never use. But a lot of times what you're going to use is the link and the visited. People just don't like blue and then purple. All right. Now, one thing, you already know this, right? Am I right in assuming that everybody in this room knows how to link to another page? Is that a fair assumption? You were supposed to do that for both tests. All right. What you will learn in just a couple minutes, or see at least in a couple minutes, excuse me, and you'll start doing it, you can also link to things on your own page. All right. Have you ever seen that where you get to the bottom and there's a link on the bottom that says go to top? We're going to learn how to do that in just a minute. Can you link to other pages? You can link to other pages on your site. You can link to other pages on other sites. Now, when you're trying to link to other pages on other sites, two things. First of all, since it's another site, you should always open it with target equals underscore blank, because it's not your site. Second, unless you can go in and look at, if you want to go to a certain part of their site, you have to see if they've already got a link to that part of the site. And if they don't, you might just be able to link to their, whatever, their home page or whatever. All right. So href, hopefully by now everybody's cool with that. The other stuff that's in here, notice title, a description that's displayed as a tooltip. Now that's something that you might want to use, because before, and again, you should never lie with something like that, but before somebody clicks a link, they might want to just rest their mouse on it, get the tooltip, and find out where it is they're going. All right. Tab index, it says sets the tab order for the links. We will talk more about tab order in Chapter 11 when we get to forms. But one thing is, you can kind of tell how long somebody's been doing this, because people who came from an office background like to use tabs. They like to tab their way around to go around an entire web page or whatever it is. So quite often for that, you use tab index, just to make it easier for them to move around. All right. Other people, no matter what, they come up here and they like their menu. All right. And other people like shortcuts. They've got 8 or 10 shortcuts they use all the time, and they memorize those. Okay. Microsoft has tried to accommodate everybody by giving you, for most things you do, all 3 options. And access key, it's not that big a thing right now, but notice if I come into here, and I'm just going to I'll bring up our test again. Okay, and I go to File. Well, notice now when I want to get out, it used to be when you clicked on here, this didn't bring up a different ribbon or a different tab. It used to be if you clicked on File, right near the bottom it said Exit. You get a listing of different options, and for Exit it would say something like Control X, because it was a real easy way to get out. Right. Microsoft actually they have standards out there for how you should set up menus and everything else if you want yours to look like Microsoft's. So if you do that, you want somebody to be able to do an Alt something or a Control something, you can use the access key to do that. All right. Here's a text link, an image link, and a text link with a title attribute. There's the text link. That's what we've been using thus far. They've changed the color. Here is an image link. How did they do that? Well, all they did was inside of their href, they put an image tag with an image in it. Okay? And here is the one with the title attributes. You put your mouse over it, boom. So if somebody didn't know what TOC stood for, that might be one that you'd want to put something actually in for. All right, so notice accessibility guidelines. If the text for the link has to be short, code the title attribute to clarify where the link is going. You should never have, I think I mentioned this before, like a click here. If I want to go to Rankin's webpage, I should say click to go to Rankin's webpage, and what should be hyperlinked is Rankin's webpage. All right. You should also code the title attribute if a link includes an image, but there's no text. It's not going to help someone who's blind right there to do this. All right. Again, you can use the A element to create a link that loads another web page. We already talked about that. We talked a little bit about tab order, more in a later chapter. Okay, we'll look at some of this stuff later. So, how to format the links. I don't know if this was the same order. Link, visited, focus, hover, active. Link, visited, no, it's not. But let's look at this. So link, colon, link, and there's going to be an A in front of that for anchor tag. A, colon, link. All right, a link that hasn't been visited yet. Again, default blue. A, colon, visited, default purple. A, colon, hover. There is no default. Did you notice this? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Again, going back to Travis's site. Did you notice when I put my mouse on an item, you see how it changes? It changes to the same color. That's a hover. Focus, as it says, an element or link or form control that has the focus, and active, the one that's currently active. All right? The ones that you're going to use most often, I think at least, are going to be link, visited, and hover. The text decoration, remember, text decoration none is going to go in and it's going to remove the underline. All right. Border style, as it says, removes the border from an image link. By default, the image has a little border around it. Remember, because the image might be on a page with a bunch of other stuff. So if you say border, when you come in here and you say border style for the image and you set it to none, it'll remove that. All right. It says apply the same formatting to both hover and focus. It says that way the formatting will be the same, whether you hover the mouse over it or you use the keyboard to tab to it. Again, these are guidelines. It's your site. All right, how to use link to open a new browser window or tab. You've already seen this. That's the target equal underscore blank. I don't think I have to go over that anymore. We have gone over it. How to create a link. This is the one here I mentioned before, to placeholders. So there's that return to top. Now, you really don't need one right here, but as the page gets bigger and bigger, or you might have what are called jumps. So you might have here, there might be something here that says, go to section 2. You go down there, there might be one that says, go back to see if this is section 1, etc. You don't want to make too many of them in there because it gets hard for people to follow along. All right. So when you do that, as it says, if you got it set up to go to top, okay, it's going to basically jump that up to the top of the page. So how do you do that? Well, you have to add an ID. Okay, where you want to go, you have to add an ID. And then you've got a link to it. But notice what you have in there for the href. # meaning ID, and then the name of that ID. So there it was, and there it's being used. And if it's hard to wrap your head around that, take a look at the example that's in the book, or just Google it and try using one of their examples. Again, the best way for you to learn this, sometimes there'll be things in here that might not be on an assignment and are on a test, or vice versa. All right? So they go through the steps right here. Okay, how to link to a media file. There are other ways of doing it other than this. Did everybody hear me? There's other ways of doing this stuff. When we get later in the book, it's like chapters 12, 13, 14, or 15. One of those chapters talks about using media files. It's all on that. So it's on audio files and video files. All right? All they're doing right here is they're saying, okay, so read the instructor's summary. So notice what they're doing. They're linking to a PDF. All right? So href equals that PDF file. It's good. Would this work without the type equal? I don't know. All right? But you'd see something like this. So let's say that I had all my stuff, and I do have my stuff all out on Inside Rankin. All right? Some instructors do that where they set up their own home page. I tried doing that once, and it got so out of date so fast, I spent a lot of time fixing it up, so I just said, the heck with it, and I stopped doing it. So when you click on it, the idea is it brings that up. Okay. Now, the other ones that are in there, there's a link to an MP3 file. That literally is going to be a hyperlink. And when you click on it, it's literally going to open up that MP3 file. All right. And here's one that goes to a PowerPoint show. Again, when you do that kind of stuff, if you're ever going to anything external, check and make sure that what you're using is either free and it's put on there that it is, or if you're using something that's someone else's, at least email them and ask them if you can do that. All right? There's all sorts of cases where people have done stuff they shouldn't have done. I've told the story before. You probably haven't heard it, and maybe you have. I don't know. But I still remember years and years ago, I was out at some website, and on there they had these. It was different. At the time, it was cool looking. That it had like little flames coming out, and it looked like room, room, room type of thing. And I thought, that's pretty cool. Within a week, I saw that on a dozen different websites. Somebody went and ripped off what somebody else had put out there. I shouldn't say ripped it off. If they had their permission, fine. But if they didn't, that's not good. Again, we will talk about this stuff in much more depth and breadth of coverage in later chapters. All right. How to create email, phone, and Skype links. This is that mail to. We've talked about that before. All right. In fact, a lot of people, what they do is right here. So let's say this was mine. And it said mail to jpscott@rankin.edu. They'll take this same thing right here and just put in jpscott@rankin.edu. They'll put the exact same, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. All right. You can actually add more stuff in here. I don't want to get into this right now, but if you look right here, this says mail to muroc.com. This question mark, what comes after the question mark and goes all the way till the end here, so from here to here, that's referred to as a query string. And that what that says is CC, in other words, who are you sending it to? Ben@muroc.com. All right, so that is one thing in your query string. And then there's an ampersand and another one. The subject will be webmail. You can set this stuff up. Why would you want to do that? We'll talk about this at a later time, but let's suppose that you're sending out you've got your portfolio, and you put it online, and now you're showing it to people. And you might want something that says, you might have a link in there that says, want to contact me? On a contact form, they fill it out, they click it, okay, and what it could do is it could bring up an email for you, and it could already fill in that it's coming to me, what the subject is, etc. All right. Here's one for a phone number, just so you know, and unless this has changed, you can look. Tel is for telephone, and you'll notice it looks like it's pretty well supported right now. You all have, I'm sure, you have all done this at one time or another, where you're out on a website and there's a link or something in there that clicks and it brings up the phone number in there. All right, that's what you can do here. Skype, I haven't worked with much. I mean, I've done Skype sessions. I think with Zoom, I don't think Skype sessions are as big a thing as they used to be, and maybe I'm wrong. All right. Navigation menus then are next. In fact, before we start this, it's 9. Let's take 10 minutes, all right? So please come back at 9:10. All right, let's finish up the chapter then. We don't have too much to go. How to create navigational menus. All right. Usually navigation menus, they go across, and then when you click on them, they go down. So in other words, they're typically across, they're horizontal, and as you click, if you've got submenus, they're vertical. All right. Now, does it mean you have to do it like that? You know, it's your site. You've got to do it for, whatever way somebody wants. This first example they show in here is kind of silly, for lack of better words, because what they have here is a vertical menu. And you can see they very much exaggerated the way the buttons would look on here. Okay? You can take a hyperlink and you can turn it into making it look exactly like a button if you want to by using CSS. All right? When we get to where we're using Bootstrap, it's even easier than that. So we'll talk about that at that time, okay? And when you notice on here what you might want to do, so you notice they've got the list style, type equal null, etc. They've used the current one, so whatever one you're currently on, they've given it a different color. You oftentimes see that kind of thing to show where you are on a page. The other thing, too, that, again, I may have mentioned this to you before, I may not have, I don't remember. But a lot of times, they don't have one on here, but if you ever go out to a website and way in the left-hand corner, they've got a logo, they'll have that logo there on every page, and you can always click on the logo, and that'll always get you back to the home page. Again, those are just kind of standard things. It's not so much that you have to do something like that. It's just pretty much protocol that that's the way people do things. So this is the HTML for that. All right, and the CSS. So you can see what they've added there. Here they've removed the underlines, display block. All right. They added some padding. This is another one. You've got this code. You could play around with that if you want to learn more about how to do this. All right, so here's the horizontal one. And there's quite a bit of difference between these two when you look at these two pictures. The first one is one I think pretty much people are used to seeing, maybe without the underlines. The second one, not so much, but it doesn't mean that it's never used. All right, again, sorry. I have done things in the past where I have done something and for someone, and they've said, hey, I want this. And I think to myself, no, you don't. But I don't say anything. It's their website. All right, show you this, and maybe you've seen this already, maybe you have not, but I'm just going to show it to you anyway. All right. This, and it's for some reason it's goofed up on my machine, but this guy right here, that's a friend of mine. That's a guy I karaoke with, but unfortunately he's moved up to Tennessee, so it makes it kind of hard. All right, but the point is he was a salesman for years, made pretty good money, etc., but decided to retire. His wife is still working because according to him, they'd probably drive each other nuts if they were home all the time. But he is home all the time because he retired, but he started a pet sitting service. All right, and he wanted something, so he sent me a bunch of pictures. And you may or may not be able to see this, but okay, it's called Leave Me at Home. Okay. Here's his story, and it's actually pretty sad. That was his dog. That was Lily. He had never left her alone, ever, not even for a night. When they traveled anywhere, they went to a motel that allowed pets, or they took, whatever. I think it was either a friend or a kid got married out of state, so he boarded the dog. Came to pick her up the next morning, and she was dead. To his knowledge, there was nothing wrong with her. But, I mean, what are you going to do? That's why he's decided to start this, because he figured it would be something where you could, you would trust somebody, all right? The point is, when you start looking through this, this is what I had people set up. This is all stuff. So if you look in here, for example,
I'm Kathy. This is
I know it's.
I have Ziggy, 2 wire fox terriers.
He wanted that in there.
Is my dog.
So when you look in here, he wanted that. These are testimonials that he has. I wanted to lay them out in a real nice format. He didn't want that. He wanted the actual testimonials. He took the picture. He wanted it done like that. It's his site. That's what he wanted. All right? So you're going to find that a lot when if you go out, especially if you freelance, because some people who have left the program here, that's what they do after a while, is they go out and they hang their own shingle out. All right? The other thing, too, is if somebody asks for this right there, and you think to yourself, there's no way they're going to want that. Well, that probably means they're going to want you to come back later and fix it then. So that maybe is more work for you. All right, so here's the horizontal, and it shows you the horizontal, the actual HTML, because it's the same. Home, get tickets, become a member, and about us. What changes is the CSS between the two. So that's the CSS for the first one and the CSS for the second one. Please, when you're taking a test, I have had people tell me, that's the only day in this class that really goes like that. If you can use something that's in here or use it as a model to get started, that's not cheating. All right? So here's a two-tier type of menu right here. And again, you probably have seen this kind of thing right there. All right? What does that mean? Well, if you look at it, this is an unordered list, right? This unordered list item right here has got an unordered list in it. That's how you set it up. Unordered list. Okay, there it is. There's your list items. And this list item has got an unordered list in it. So again, the CSS for it is shown. And as they mentioned, to create a multi-tier, you code unordered lists within the li elements of another unordered list. In other words, it's nested. You've got a menu within a menu. A list within a list, however you want to refer to that. And then it goes down to 3. I will tell you, I don't know if I've ever seen one on a full-fledged site that's more than this. You may or may not have heard of this, but there's something that's referred to as the 3-click rule on a website. And what that means is, in an ideal world, you should be able to get to anywhere you want in a website in 3 clicks. Now, if you made this 5 or 6 deep, it might impress people that you were able to do that, but would it be real easy if then this dropped down and then another one dropped down, for example? Pretty soon your whole screen is a big menu thing. All right? You should always keep that in mind. Now, that's one time where if I was creating something for someone and they wanted it to be that deep, I might tell them, is there a different way that we could set this up? But again, there's the HTML for it. And you'll notice there's the CSS for it. And as you'd probably guess, the more you do this, the more it's going to be very important for you to be adding IDs and classes so that you only go in and, if you want something to be a different color or a different whatever, the more you add IDs and classes to website elements, the more control you're taking over those elements. All right? And that's it. So let's take, and I don't want to spend much time on this, but let's take a couple minutes. Where is it? So this was the email I sent to you this morning. Not much. Chapter 7 and 8 homework and lab assignment file zipped, as noted in the subject line above. Note this is due a week from this Friday. Okay? So it is 9:19. Give me till 9:30. And you'll have the rest of the period then. You'll have 2 hours and 20 minutes. If you have not turned in the first set of assignments on 1 to 4, turn them in as soon as possible. You may lose some points, but turn them in anyway. All right? This weekend, I'm going to do a boatload of grading. My wife hates it when I do that on weekends, but my wife is going to visit our daughter in Illinois this weekend, and she's taking our other daughter who lives with us with her. So it's going to be me and the dog. All right? The dog doesn't really like me very much, but if the dog goes and sits on the couch and it's just me at the table, grading and doing other stuff. So I should have everything graded by the time you get back here on Monday. Everything you've turned into that till that point. All right, but let's just take a quick look then. We'll start with the homework. So again, this is the homework for Chapter 7 and the homework for Chapter 8. For Chapter 7, utilizing the examples in Chapter 7, code the following navigation menus. Don't go nuts with them, but don't copy exactly what's in the book either. Use that as a start if you want to. Okay? But, make your own stuff, so to speak. And notice how many points these are worth. And it even tells you what page the stuff is on. So that's the homework for Chapter 7. I won't go over 8. We'll do that tomorrow. All right? So as far as the lab for Chapter 7, it says here, continue with the ShapeUp project. Do chapters 7 through 9. Also complete the exercises at the end of Chapter 7 in your textbook. All right? So what is that? The ShapeUp stuff is right here. Okay, this has got all the chapters, but you want to find 7 through 9. All right, if you've kept up with the assignments and you've done the ones for 4 to 6, you've already started on this. And these are the exercises at the end of Chapter 7. It's going to reference files and stuff that I sent you earlier that you should have under that all dev, web dev coursework. It should be in there. If for some reason you're missing something, you've got to let me know. All right, I'll make sure you get it. Questions on anything that we went over today? Questions on anything in Chapter 7 that we went over, or anything for the homework? Then the idea is tomorrow, when we start up at 8:05, I'm going to go through Chapter 8. And again, if you haven't already seen that, mentioned this earlier, but you might have come in a little late and not heard this. But Chapter 8, the next chapter that we're going over, is on responsive website design, RWD. It's about the same size as today's chapter. Some of it we've already talked about, fluid versus fixed. I showed you a simple example of a media query. I'll give you one tomorrow that's a little bit more complex. I would strongly suggest that before your next test, which will be around a week from now, I don't know when, all right, but before then, that you take a look at the example in here, the web page that uses responsive design. All right. And again, if we go back and we look at Travis's page here, does this page use responsive design? Looks like it. See, that's that hamburger menu right here. You're going to learn how to do that. We get to Bootstrap, you click on it, and it shows you the same stuff you saw previously. All right, but if we look down here, click on that again. Notice these originally, the stuff that you see down here, yeah, I don't want that. But it's got three in a row, and then there's the tour, etc. And notice once we get down there, instead of 3 in a row, there's just 1 in a row, so to speak. What's that? Oh, okay. Thank you. But now it's 1. See that? And you reach a certain point. Why? If you had that on your phone and it was 3 wide, you wouldn't be able to see anything. You'd be pinching and zooming and whatever all the time. You don't want that. You want to make it as easy as possible. That's what Chapter 8 is all about. All right? I will tell you, just so you're aware of this, next week we go and we do Chapter 9 and Chapter 10. Chapter 9 is on Flexbox. Chapter 10 is on CSS Grid. In my humble opinion, those are the 2 hardest chapters in this book. So that might be one. Again, I always tape these. You might want to go back and look at the tape, but try to be here, please, on those days. All right, because I'm going to try to give you some examples of using Flexbox and some resources and some examples of using CSS Grid. Okay? If there are no other questions, then the rest of the period is yours.